Hello, BookTube. I'm going to try and see if I can continue quickly my second shelf in my shelf tour. So we did the top shelf, which was full of classics last time. This time we're going to have a mixture, so it'll be a mixture of classics and science fiction and fantasy. So we start off with some mass market paperbacks that are sitting in front of the shelves. So we have a couple stacks of books in front of the shelves. We start off with Ray Bradbury. We got Dandelion Wine and the sequel. I've read both of these. I didn't really like the sequel very much, but it was published a lot later than the original is, which is a collection of short stories from the perspective of a young boy in his hometown, which is semi-autobiographical, since it was based off of Ray Bradbury's childhood. And I think I haven't read it in a while, but I quite liked it. And then we have a stack from all one author. We have Arthur Conan Doyle in the newer Wordsworth Classic editions. So they all look like this, with the title. They have that black border and then a poorly photoshopped image. So this is Hound of the Baskervilles in the Valley of Fear. I've read the Hound of the Baskervilles. And then The Study in Scarlet and A Sign of the Four. I've read both of these. And then we have The Case of Sherlock Holmes and His Last Bow. And I don't think I've read any from these quite yet. And then moving on, we got Nathaniel Hawthorne's A Scarlet Letter, which I have 2 editions of, as we'll see later on in the shelf tour. But this one is the edition I first read it in, and I love this cover. It's also got a matted finish on it, which I kind of like, but it's a vintage classic edition. And now we get into a lot of books that I have not actually read, starting off with The Story in the Stone, or also known as The Dream of the Red Chamber, Volume 1. I'm not going to even try and pronounce that author, a Chinese author, but this is one of the classics of Chinese history or Chinese literature. And Penguin does a 5-volume history, or a 5-volume translation, or publish 5 volumes of this, and the translator is David Hawkes. So I just have Volume 1 here, which you can see has been well read with a creased spine. And then we move on to Longbourn by Joe Baker, which is a novel I've been interested in for quite a while, because it's a different perspective or different take on Pride and Prejudice. So this is the story of Pride, this takes place during the story of Pride and Prejudice from the perspective of the servants in the Bennet household, and it follows, I believe, its own story among the servants who are always present, but they're never quite named. And then we have Charles Dickens. We got Oliver Twist. And then in the same reprint line, we have Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. See if you can get the cover there. And then last book before we get to the actual shelf is Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is a 1-volume edition that I found used, and this is the edition that I read it in. I love it because it has the French flaps and the map of Middle-earth there. And what I really like, this volume also has a sentimental value too, because when I was reading it, I was fostering a dog from the Humane Society, and well, she took a little bit of a liking to this book and took a big chomp out of this front cover here, and the only reason why she didn't tear it off is because it has the French flap there, so you can see the teeth marks all along. And at the time I wasn't too happy, though this is a used copy. I bought it used, so it wasn't like it was a brand new edition, but now I look at it fondly as a good memory, because she ended up going to a good home after I had fostered her. So now we move on to the actual shelves. Now we have this massive volume, or massive hardcover. This is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Let's see if we can get the light there. This is translated by Walter James Miller and Frederick Paul Walter, and this is the completely stored and annotated edition. And this is an edition, a newer edition that's based off of the actual French, because the editions that have been reprinted since the Victorian period, the translations are famous for not being totally accurate and basically being their own interpretation of Verne, and taking a lot of translation liberties. So then the more modern the translation for Jules Verne, the more likely you're going to actually get what Verne actually wrote in translation, basically. Moving on, we get to the complete fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm. Nice big fat volume here. This is translated with an introduction by Zach Zipes, and it says, includes the famous original 210 stories plus 40 tales that have never before appeared in English. So I look forward to reading this. Big fat volume of fairy tales. And then we move on to George MacDonald. This is Lilith and Fantastes. And George MacDonald is was a Scottish Victorian writer. This is two of his fantasy volumes in one. And I've only read Lilith, which I believe is supposed to be associated with this image here. And it's a very strange novel. I'm not quite sure I liked it, though I do like his writing style. And then we get to a small vein of Broadview classics. If you're not familiar with Broadview classics, they have a very distinct style to them, and I'll show you them as I show you this first edition. This is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie, and Peter Pan is not just a one work. It's a compilation of works that he published, which includes a novel and a play and some short stories. And as you see, they have this black and white photo cover, and then they have a very distinct back cover too, where they have a bunch of blurbs and then a small description here. And they're scholarly editions, so they're used in schools, and they usually include a lot of contemporary reviews of when the thing was first published. So, for example, this book has a bunch of reviews from the 1904, 1905 of the play that's included in this text, and then reviews for some of the shorter stories or shorter works. And then at the very end, they include a lot of different secondary material, which I'm not quite... Usually they include scholarly essays too, though I'm not sure this one does. It includes a lot of other stuff, like other works from J.M. Barrie that maybe have an association with Peter Pan. Moving on, we have Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. I'm not a very big fan of these covers, of these black and white covers, but the editions are so well done as a scholarly work that I can't help but pick them up when they're cheap. So this is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and it's got a whole lot of different reviews and everything in here. So that's that. I just saw a name in the acknowledgement section of that book that kind of caught me off guard. Anyways, then we have The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. That one is a bit better of a cover. City glowing in the black and white frame. And then we have, so this is a very different book. It's the Uncensored Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. So if you're familiar with the Picture of Dorian Gray, or at least its publishing history, he initially wrote the novel in a manuscript, which he either released serially or was published whole in a magazine, but then he edited it into a full book version. I don't know, that wasn't very clear. So he wrote the manuscript, but when it was converted from manuscript to being published in a magazine, the editor of the magazine edited it himself, to which includes censoring some things that were not considered appropriate for the times. But even then, he still got in trouble. But then when it came to publishing it as a actual book, he edited it himself a second time, or he edited it himself again to fit the book the actual book that we have now called The Picture of Dorian Gray. That's usually in modern reprint lines. So what this book does, published by Belknap Press from Harvard, is they publish the actual manuscript that he wrote, which is why they call it uncensored, and they have that suggestive cover, because it's supposed to make it seem like it's a lot more explicit than how the original work is. And I have not actually read this yet. I've read the Picture of Dorian Gray that we have now that he was edited into the novel that we now know as The Picture of Dorian Gray, but I've not read this uncensored version and compared the two, which is always an interesting thing to do. Like, I've read 1980 or Fahrenheit. Was it Frankenstein, where she has the two editions, and I've read both of them fairly close together, and you could see there's quite a bit of difference there. And then we got some thin works. We got Edith Wharton's Ethan Frome, which is a very tiny little work. And then we have Animal Farm, which I have read. I've read this quite a few times, actually. Not my favorite thing by him, but it's always a staple in schools, so. And then we come to a German author, Hermann Brock. This is Guiltless. This is a novel of his, not his most famous work, probably Death and Virgil or The Sleepwalkers are. I don't own any of them yet, but I do have this novel. Yeah, and he was one of the better-known German novelists of the 20th century. And then we have a Norton Critical edition. We have Classic Fairy Tales. So this is edited by Maria Tatar. And the other volume of fairy tales I had was just the Brothers Grimm, but this includes fairy tales from all different kinds of storytellers and all different kinds of sources. And I believe, yeah, so they have Little Red Riding Hood, and then they have 7 or 8 different interpretations by different authors. Beauty and the Beast, Snow White, Cinderella, Bluebeard, Hansel and Gretel, and then they have a little section on Oscar Wilde and Hans Christian Andersen. And then we move on to The Once and Future King by T.H. White, and a nice paperback edition with, I really like that ribbon there with a sword in the middle. This is the classic fantasy King Arthur tale. This is the novel that I want to end off my study of Arthurian literature with, because I got a lot of original Arthurian literature from the Middle Ages, and I've read some of it, and I want to go into progression to see how the story changes and evolves leading up to this book. Though there is, of course, Arthurian literature published after his book, but I would like to read this one and give it a try at the very end. And then we get into some books that I've read a little bit, some books that I have read. So we have Aldous Huxley's The Brave New World. I've read this a few times. It's probably my least favorite dystopian novel that I've read, or at least one of my least favorite, but I still quite like it. I'm not quite sure how it works as a novel, but the concept is still very interesting. Then we have the 1984 with a cover that I love, the Signet Classic, with just the eye there. And I've spent many, not hours, but lots of time staring into this eye here, and just looking at all its fibers and ingrained and thinking of it as the eye Big Brother, and then it's starkly white other than that eye, and then you have the eye in full on the spine here. And we have the Canticle for Leibowitz, which I read and I thought it was okay, or it was good, it was fine, but it didn't blow me away like I've heard some people say that it did for them. And so I don't really know what to make of this. This is sort of dystopian, but still, I felt like the concept could have been done better. And then we have a hardcover of James Tiptree's Up the Walls of the World. Rather ugly cover there, but it's it's a hardcover. There's the author there, and my pay stickers, which I did not actually. I bought this online, so I didn't actually buy it at a store like that that had stickers like that. But anyways, Up the Walls of the World. I haven't read that one yet. Then we've read Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. Some consider this his best novel. I'm a big Ray Bradbury fan, but I like his short stories a lot better, and I wasn't a big fan of this novel. Can't entirely say why, other than I just didn't think the concept worked very well. And then we have The Illustrated Man, which I reread this year, and as much as these stories blew me away when I was in high school, I found a lot of them were they didn't have a whole lot of depth to them, other than that initial blow you away when you first read them. Like they're quite entertaining and they're well written, but they don't have that depth to them that I had once given them. Like usually with books or short stories or whatever that have a lot of depth, the more you read them, the more you get out of them. This one, when I reread it this year, it kind of left me empty. So it's too bad, because a lot of the stories, their premises, they stick with me. But even then, I felt like I was letting my favorite author down. And then we have Ray Bradbury's The Martian Chronicles, which I have not read in its entirety. I've read a lot of his short story collections, which do include stories that are in here, but I have not read this as a book, which I really should. I don't think it would take me very long, and I want to see how it fits as a completed work, or as a narrative whole, I guess. So we'll see about that. And we have a few more books left. We have M. John Harrison's Verconium. It's basically an anthology of some short stories, novellas, and some short novels that are all part of this Verconium fantasy network. Which Verconium is like a city, and it's about the happenings of that city. And I haven't read any of it yet, so I hope it's interesting, hope it's good. And then now we go back to ancient classic literature. We have The Romance of the Kingdoms. This is volume 1. This is translated from the Chinese by C.H. Brewitz Taylor. Very nice cover there. Found this one used. I have not read it yet. If I like this one volume, I'll certainly be buying the volume 2 new. And then we have China Miéville, and this is The City and the City, which as you see there, you got this city there, and then you got a city down there. So City and the City, and I think it's a science fiction work, which I am interested in. This author does interest me as a science fiction writer, but I have not actually read any of his work. So we'll see how that goes. And then we come to the last book on the shelf, which is a big fat book. It is The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikabue, and this is the Dennis Washburn translation. Big, beautiful paperback. Got it brand new, and yet I've never read it. I was going to read it a few years ago when I believe Classics and Company did a read-along of it, but I'm not sure how many people ended up finishing it, and for some reason my reading went to different directions, so there we have it. Tale of Genji. I'm not sure what to expect of the Tale of Genji, because you have some people whose opinions I respect, who love it, and then others whose opinion I respect, who think it's extremely tedious. So we'll see. It's considered the first novel, so we'll see how that goes, and I'll stop there. And we got just under 20 minutes. That's pretty good. See you, BookTube.